Well, welcome back to the channel, Old Cars New Van, and in this series of videos I'm going to try and attempt, as much for my benefit actually as you the viewers, to document all the cars I have ever owned so far in my life. Now this will become apparent that this isn't actually that easy an exercise, so I'm going to break it down, and this first part is going to focus on the daily driver, the main car that I had at any given period in my life, and then subsequent parts will focus on classic cars, second cars, hobby cars, kit cars, and indeed vehicles that I bought on a whim and kept for 2 weeks and then sold on. So, as I say, more complicated than it might appear, but this first part we're going to focus on the daily drivers. So the year is 1987, and me as a keen 17-year-old had just passed his test. And very kindly, my dad said he would buy me an old car, which was incredibly generous, obviously, because that also involved insuring it and taxing it and making sure it was MOT'd. But the slight rub was that my father, bless him, he just decided that an Austin Allegro was the car. I didn't really get any say in that. And so this brown Austin Allegro appeared. Its registration number was FTU2T. Now, as I say, I don't want to sound ungrateful. I was clearly very grateful that somebody had bought me a car and that it represented freedom and being grown up and being able to go out with my mates and all the rest of it. And that was great. At 17, would I have chosen a brown Allegro? Probably not. The irony is I probably like it more today than I did back then, because it was, as I say, in 87, it was a 78. So it was only 9 years old. So it certainly wasn't a classic car. It was just an old rubbish car that people mocked because Austin Allegros were mocked. But anyway, this is where it started. So there's a certain degree of fondness because it is the first car. But it was a nightmare. I mean, I just can't dress it up any other way. It was constantly breaking down, constantly having problems. And again, my father had to sort of step in and constantly be paying repair bills on it. So it wasn't a great start. And after 10 months, because I got a little bit of my own money together by then, I turned to him and say, would you mind terribly if I sold this? Because I think I can get something better and will reduce all these repair bills you're having to pay, which takes us on to the second car. And I bought this, a yellow, talking of funny colours, 1982 Volkswagen Polo. Its reg number was CCM 985X. And this is very much the car that I chose. I quite liked the yellow. It was quite fun, but it did mean that I got it cheaper than X-Reg cars were going for in the day, because I think it was a bit of a Marmite colour. But I didn't mind it. And again, compared with the brown Allegro, it was cool. So as I say, 1982, this was have been in 1988. So it was only 6 years old. But obviously a far more modern design than the Austin Allegro, and it drove like far more modern. There was none of the Bros problems that I'd grown accustomed to with the Allegro. There was none of the breaking down. It just worked. I have to say, it being a 1.1, it was significantly slower than the Austin Allegro. That little 1275 1.3 Allegro sort of beetled along quite nicely. The Polo was a bit more sedentary, but nonetheless a far better car and far more reliable. And I would have kept it longer than about a year because I had no issues with it. But a year after buying it, my father informed me that he was selling his Audi 80 1.8 GL B619 GRP, which was a 1985 example, and as I say, in 1989, so it was only 4 years old. And it had done a lot of mileage because he'd used it as a commercial travelling vehicle. So in 4 years, he'd rucked up about 108,000 miles, which is quite a lot for a 4-year-old car. But obviously, he'd maintained it perfectly, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. So I asked him, how much are they offering you for trade-in on this? And it was something paltry, like sort of £2,000. And I said, well, that's crazy. I'll buy it off you for £2,000. So the deal was done. and I ended up selling the Polo for £1,500, 1,500 if memory serves me correctly. So actually the price to change was only £500. And this was just a different league. I mean, 1.8, sort of semi-executive car at the age of 19. I just thought I was the daddy in this thing. I really did. It seemed like the fastest thing in the world. It had electric windows all round. It had central locking. It had rear headrests. It had a great 6-speaker stereo. It was just awesome, and I absolutely loved that car. Went all over in it, went to Europe in it, did a lot of miles. Sadly, it was written off. So that was a bit of a tragedy because, as I say, I absolutely loved that car. But that was actually written off in France. Awkwardly, it was abroad at the time. Anyway, I'm not going to go into those details. It is what it is, and the vehicle was gone. So I returned home from France carless, and the only vehicle I had at my disposal was a Rover P6 Gov 747L. Now, this is the vehicle that has inspired so much in me with regards to my recent purchase with obviously Dizzy, the Rover that you've seen on this channel. This car started off as a hobby car. It was alongside the Audi 80, but because it became my main driver when the Audi 80 no longer existed, I'm including it in this list because that's the car that I then drove around in. And it was a bit of a rough example. It shouldn't have passed its MOT, and after about 2 months, I decided to cut my losses and get rid of that, even though I really loved the car. And I replaced it with a bit of a left field choice, a Mitsubishi Saparo. Now, you must excuse this photo because I don't have a photo of the original car, so I have used a photo off the internet here, and this is a foreign photo from abroad, so it's left-hand drive. Obviously, my car was right-hand drive, but the colour and the spec and everything else is identical, so that's why I'm including it. This was actually the car, a great friend of mine's uncle's car who was giving up driving, so that's why I ended up buying it. And it was lovely. It was sort of American styling. It was American sort of like driving experience, very relaxed, very laid back. It was great fun. Unfortunately, not too long after I bought it, probably about 2 or 3 months, the head gasket went. So it wasn't worth repairing. So I sold it on spares and repair. By this time, it's 1991, by the way. We've sort of accelerated on a couple of years, and I'm finishing university and I'm getting my first job, which, living in Chester, was based in Liverpool, and I needed a car really to go to work every day. So I bought something that was quite modern again, not particularly interesting, but just good value and bread and butter, really. So I bought this opaline green Austin Montego 1.6L. So this was the same year as the Audi 80 B-Reg. And as I say, between the Audi, going through the Rover, going through the Mitsubishi and getting this Montego is probably only about 4 months in total, but they were my main drivers. So yeah, green Montego, bread and butter, nothing special, but it was reliable enough and it got me to and from work. And I kept that for probably about, 3 or 4 months, and then I decided to splash out and buy a Rover 800. I bought the wrong one, in fairness, because I bought the Rover 820 SE Auto, and what I should have done was bought the 820 SI, which my friend had, which was actually a very nice drive and was quite peppy and sporty. The 820 SE wasn't. It was a bit slow, but it was nice and comfortable and relaxed, and again, great for commuting up and down from Chester to Liverpool on the long runs. So that went on for probably about 5 months, and then out of the blue, I got a new job. So I left the job in Liverpool and took up a new job, and this job offered a company car. So this is my first brand new car that was delivered to me. And I'm including it because I didn't own it, but obviously it was my main daily driver, so it's got a place on this list. And it was, we're now in 1992, and this was a J-Reg for the UK market, Peugeot 309 GLD, brand new. I absolutely hated it. I can't express how much I loathe this car. I mean, for the first week, it was great because it was a brand new car with literally 8 miles on the clock. And I thought, wow, I'm 22 years of age and I've got a brand new car. This is cool. But it was a dreadful car. I'm sorry. I just can't dress it up any other way. So within the company, I tried to sort of get on the right side of people who had the powers of be, as it were, to negotiate these things. And I managed to swap it out after probably about 9 months for a vehicle that was a colleague's car, but he had left. So it was sort of sitting in the pool, as it were. And that was a Peugeot 405 GLD. And I absolutely loved that car. It's extraordinary how two cars, both J-Regs, 1992, could be so different. Hated the 309, loved the 405. It was as slow as dogs, but my word, the handling was just extraordinary. You could go round corners and the thing was just like on rails. It was just a completely different league to cars that we'd experienced up to this point in this country anyway, as far as road handling was concerned. It was just fantastic. So I loved that, and I kept that until it had to go back because the company only kept the cars for 3 years. So when it was 3 years old, it had to go back. And that gave me the opportunity to select a new company car from a fairly short list, I have to say. You know, I didn't have a free rein here. They always had to be diesels in this age. We're probably looking now, where are we now? Probably 1994. And I ended up choosing this Renault 19 RTD Saloon in white because it looked, especially as I had enough money left in the budget, so my company car allowance, to nominate the sporty wheels, it looked like the fast one. It looked like the turbo, but it wasn't. It was an RT diesel, but it certainly looked the part. Delivered brand new. It broke down on day 3. Renault quality control. It was 3 days old and it broke down. But anyway, that was fixed. And yeah, it was a good car. You know, it was fast, it was punchy. Being the turbo diesel, it was a lot faster than the previous 405. And yeah, it was a good car. Went to Europe in it on holidays, did a trip to Munich, came back virtually non-stopping apart from refueling back in the day. Yeah, really good car. Probably the first car I ever did 100 miles an hour in on the German Autobahn. Yeah, it was quite fast. Anyway, this moves on then, still at the same company, but about 4 months before I was going to leave that company, and I knew I was leaving because I'd got a new job lined up, I actually did another internal swap just for a laugh because I was leaving in a few months' time. I managed to swap out the Renault 19 internally for a Vauxhall Zira. What a ridiculous car that was. But I only did it, as I say, because I knew I was going to be at the company another 4 months and I wouldn't have to keep it very long. And it was just a bit of a laugh. And yeah, I ran that until I left the company in 1996. So 1996, only 9 years in to my driving career, having passed my test, and we're already 11 cars in, and that's ignoring all the hobby cars, as I say, that will feature in a different video. So yeah, I left that company and I joined another company, which again was a company car scheme, and this starts the period of Ford Mondeo man. I was Ford Mondeo man. I had 3 other things. It was the standard issue car for that company. So when I joined, I got a second-hand one because, again, it was somebody's cast off who had left the company. And and I had to keep that until it was 3 years old and was going to go back. So I had that for about 9 months. It was a really basic 1.6 petrol Aspen, which was just the basic. It wasn't even an L. It was an Aspen. It had wind-up windows. In 1996, 11 years on from when the Audi 80 was manufactured, we were back down to wind-up windows. But it was a nice enough car. The Mondeos always drove well. They were always quite nice on the handling. And it was okay. And as I say, thankfully, I didn't have to keep it that long, because when it was 3 years old, in 1997, I ordered a brand new Ford Mondeo. This, again, at that stage, there was an advantage of having a diesel. So it was a 1.8 turbo diesel, but it was the GLX, so it was a lot better spec than the Aspen that it replaced. And funnily, I can remember the reg number of that car, P784VKH. Got it brand new, 0 miles on the clock, and in 3 years I did 126,000 miles in that car. In 3 years. I was doing a lot of commercial travelling at that time, and it never missed a beat, never broke down, never had any issues other than tyres, brakes and servicing. So it was a reliable, competent car. Was it desperately enjoyable? Well, no, but, it was pretty competent. And I think even to this day is probably the single vehicle that I've done the most miles in, because as I say, that is quite a mileage in 3 years. So that takes us to the year 2000, and the car was 3 years old, was definitely time for replacement given the mileage. By that time, they'd relaxed the rules about having a diesel, so I replaced it with a 2-litre petrol gear Mondeo, 2000 on the X reg. I can't remember the reg number of it, I'm sorry. Nice dark green colour, and it was really nicely equipped, that. I think I'm right in saying that is the first car I ever owned or had use of that had air conditioning. The previous Mondeo didn't, surprisingly, even though it was a GLX. In 1997, you didn't get aircon as standard, but in the year 2000 on a gear, you did. So that was the first car with aircon. Probably kept that about 8 or 9 months, and then I left that company, and I went to work for a much smaller company, quite close to home. So at the time, I didn't feel I needed to fork out as much money on a car as a brand new Ford Mondeo, because the next company, because being a small company, didn't have a company car scheme. In fact, there are no more company cars in this list. It was just those 2 companies that I worked for that offered cars. So in probably late 2000, maybe early 2001, I bought a 1996, might have been 1997, P-Reg Citron Xantia estate, a diesel, 1.9 diesel, turbo diesel LX, just because it was practical and I could get loads of stuff in it, and it was quite good value, and it was cheap to run, being my own car now out of the company car scheme. Good car, comfortable. The suspension's fantastic on those. That hydromatic suspension that the Citron's so famous for. It was really quite cool. I can't remember why I sold. Oh, yes, I can. I sold it because I needed even sort of more space and more practicality. So I bought a nearly new, this is 2003 now, Vauxhall Zira, of all things, 1.6 petrol, but they were really cheap and really good value for a virtually brand new car. As I say, it's about 6 months old, and I think it was like $9,000 or something. It wasn't a lot of money for a virtually brand new car. In between buying that, I unfortunately had a road traffic accident, not in a car. I was actually on a motorbike, which meant that I was sort of off the road, as it were, for a few months. And when I came back to the road after recovering, I decided at that stage to actually give the Vauxhall Zira to my then wife, not Maya, my then wife, and so that ceased to become my main driver. And again, I had a job at that point much closer to home, so I just bought a cheaper car. I bought a Seat Toledo, 1997 P Reg. It was all right, nothing fancy. Yeah, practical and boring. I seem to remember it smelled of petrol a lot, all the time. And I didn't keep that very long. Again, I was into sort of chopping and changing quite a lot. So probably just a few months later, I actually exchanged that for an old Jaguar XJ, 1993. Had quite good history and had been owned by somebody relatively famous, I think it was. Or at least titled. I think it was Lord somebody or other who was the previous owner. So it was actually quite a good buy, until it dumped all its power steering fluid in the middle lane of the M1, that is. So yeah, I sort of delved back into old cars at this point, and then always sort of regretted it a little bit. So after the Toledo, I thought, this is crazy. Come on, buy a decent car. So I went out and bought a Vauxhall Astra SRI 2.2. It was a 53 plate, so that's late 2003, and this is probably now either 2004 or 2005. Good car. Slightly disappointing that it didn't feel as fast as I was expecting it to feel. I know that sounds a bit silly, but I thought, well, 2.2 SRI, this is going to be quite... And it was, but it wasn't anything special. So I got a bit disillusioned with that, actually. And after probably 8 months, I sort of straight swapped that for a Volkswagen Passat V5. Quite a left field choice, but it was lovely, and it had been really optioned up really nicely from new. Black leather, full walnut dashboard, inserts in it. It was a really, really nice car. We're probably now, 2005, maybe pushing into 2006. And again, I'd have kept the Passat, but it started having electrical gremlins that even Volkswagen, because it was under a Volkswagen extended warranty, and even Volkswagen couldn't fix it. So that makes you sort of start to worry, doesn't it? So literally with about a month to go before the extended warranty was due to expire, I thought, well, I can't carry on running this car, because what happens if I can't fix it myself in the future? So again, a bit of a sideways move. I swapped it for a Renault Clio Cup Sport, from the sublime to the ridiculous. I mean, this thing was great fun. I mean, it was really quick and it handled really, really well. But everything else was really, really bad on it. The build quality was bad. The comfort was bad. The fuel economy was bad. It was great fun, but the novelty wore off quite quickly because, if it's not comfy, it can be fast and great handling. But, if you're uncomfortable every time you drive it, again, you're not going to stick with it too long, are you? So that was a 2005 plate. So we must have been sort of 06, 07 now by this stage. So I decided, no, I want something different. So I sold that, and I bought a Jaguar X Type. A Ford Mondeo in drag, you could say, but not any old X Type. It was the 3 litre, and it was the manual, and it was the all-wheel drive. And I really liked that car. I thought it drove really, really well, and that was quick, particularly being the manual. 3 litre V6. It was a quick car. It was a thirsty car, being a 3 litre, as you can imagine. It was nice. Again, on longer runs, not as comfortable as you might think. I sort of, did get a bit of a numb bum every now and again. The next car that I bought after the Jaguar X Type, I was debating with myself putting this video together as to whether to class one as a hobby car and one as an ordinary car. But really, in fairness, I did equal miles in both of them. So I think they both have to go into the list. I decided that no one car was particularly satisfactory for me, and I needed two cars in my life, both as daily drivers. So at the same time, I bought a Mazda MX5 Mark 2.5 and a Saab 93. So the combined cost was probably about the same as the Jaguar, maybe a couple of £1,000 more, but not dramatically different. And I ran two cars, and I probably did. I was doing much less miles by now. I was probably doing about 10,000 miles a year, but I literally did 5,000 miles in the Mazda and 5,000 miles in the Saab. So it's really hard to say the Mazda's a hobby car, because it wasn't. It was my main driver for 50% of the time, and it was great, roof down. It was good fun, and yet the Saab was great as well. 1.8T, surprisingly quick for an ordinary car, very comfortable. It was a really, really nice car, that. And the only reason I got rid of both of those vehicles was because, again, I changed jobs, and now I was back into big commuting again. I was going to be doing 30, 40,000 miles a year, and neither of those vehicles was going to be suitable. I needed a diesel, and I needed something modern and really reliable. So I went out and bought, I wasn't particularly looking for it, but I got a crazy deal on it. I went out and bought virtually a brand new Mini. The reason why I got a crazy deal on it was because it was pre-registered, and it was a limited edition 2012 to commemorate the London Olympics. So you can see we've wound on a few years here now. It's now 2012. So the dealer had registered it, but had dramatically reduced the price because the Olympics were way gone. They were over. They were history. Nobody was interested anymore. And yet this car was all logoed up like it was in the Olympics. So they were selling it brand new for sort of like £11,000. And it had full heated leather. It had every single option you could possibly put on a Mini. And it was the Cooper diesel. So it's going to be ideal for those longer runs, and obviously very economical. So I bought that. And I kept that for 2 years, I'm going to say. Yeah, while I was doing that much longer journeying. So I racked up 65,000 miles or something in that car, and I sold it for about £10,000. I sold it for about £1,000 less than I paid for it brand new. That's how crazily cheap it was when it was new, and me putting all those miles on it. So again, new job dictated a different sort of style of car, much closer to home, far less miles, so didn't need as an expensive a car as my daily driver. Obviously the money was going into hobby cars on the side, but that'll be a different video. So I bought an Alfa Romeo 159 Estate diesel. Slow as dogs, because it wasn't the turbo. It wasn't the powerful diesel, should I say. It was a turbo, but it wasn't the powerful diesel. But it looked fantastic. I mean, it looked like an Alfa Brera from the front, and the inside was really nice and all leathered up, and it was just a comfortable, nice car. And that was okay. Although it started, as you can imagine, giving me problems. Being an Alfa, the electric started playing a bit funny. So I had to get rid of that really quickly. And my wife at the time needed a new vehicle as well. So what I did was I part exchanged the Alfa against a sort of family wagon, as it were, a Chevrolet Captiva. 2012 Captiva, bit of an odd choice, but they weren't a bad thing. They were only a Vauxhall, really, dressed up with a Chevy badge, so it was all quite reliable stuff, really. And I kept that for about 3 months and then gave it to my then wife. And I bought my sort of probably even to this day one of the more expensive vehicles I've ever bought, and that was a BMW M235i. So we're now, as you can imagine, racing on a bit in time. We're probably now, I'm going to say 2015. BMW M235i. Wow. I mean, in a straight line, fast, ludicrously fast, below 5 seconds fast, but not a car that inspired confidence. To my mind, there was just too much power going through the rear wheels and the handling just wasn't up to it. In the way that an MX5, the chassis and the handling overwhelmed the engine, in a BMW M235i, the engine overwhelms the chassis and the handling. And it was a bit skittish, to be honest. It was a bit leery, particularly in the wet. It was lethal, actually. And I also, by this stage, I thought I'm probably getting a bit too old for these sort of silly fast cars like this. So I part exchanged that against a comfortable barge, as I call it, a Volkswagen Touareg, which was really comfy, really squashy, really nice, quite quick for what it was. As I say, they're a big, powerful sort of executive sort of SUV, aren't they? But yeah, again, there was a huge change of circumstances at that point in my life as well. I was getting divorced without going into too many details. So again, that ended up going in about 2017, and I just bought a boring practical car. I bought a Kia Ceed diesel just to chug around in, which was very reliable and was under warranty, 7-year warranty still. It was a 64 plate, so it was only 3.5 years old when I bought it in 2017, and it was fine. Boring, but fine. During that time, I met my lovely wife, Maya, and we obviously subsequently got married. So the Kia went in, where are we now, 2020. I actually kept that quite a long time, that Kia, because it just worked. It just did what it needed to do. But in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, I bought my current vehicle, the 2019 Volkswagen Transporter, which is just fantastic. We love that vehicle. It's one of the few modern vehicles that makes any sense to us at all. Our hearts and souls, as you know, are in old classic cars. Modern cars, they just depreciate and they've got too many electrical problems. But of all of them, the Transporter makes more sense to us because we can do so much with it. We can sleep in it, we can day van it, we can go to car rallies in it and have effectively a room away from home. We've got cooking facilities in it. It's brilliant for the dog. Yeah, we absolutely love it. And obviously that's going to be a long-term keeper. We've already owned that over 3 years and no intentions of selling it. And obviously that features as the new van in the channel's title. So there we go. That is all my daily drivers to date. There are far more cars that aren't included in this list that will be in parts 2, part 3, probably part 4. I appreciate this may not be interesting to everybody. It's as much for my benefit as yours, this one, so I'm being a little bit selfish. It's a great way of recording for my own benefit, the cars that I've had over the years. But I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you've got this far in the video. If you have, thank you. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I'll see you again very soon with some probably more interesting videos about classic cars rather than just my back history. But thank you anyway. Cheerio.